All right. I want to launch now into a discussion of the events leading up to the first great council of the church, which of course is not only important to us from the point of view of Christian theology, but is very important philosophically. Really, during the years from about 100 to 300, pagan philosophy isn't doing much. We've got Neoplatonism we'll have to look at, we've got Manichaeism we'll have to look at, but for the most part, the action is in the church. And so that's why we're focusing more or less on the development of thought as related to Christian teaching, because that's where the bulk of the important work is doing. It all culminates in the first kind of great expression of Christian thought with the council that is called, what is it? What's the first great council of the church? And the one that will probably occupy our attention first of all, as you would at least expect it to, and it is known as the Council of... Mr. Haverkamp, you got it in your mind? I see a deep, pensive look on your face. That is correct. The Council of Nicaea takes place in the year... Josiah?
315.
Not quite. Nicole? 325. Thank you. That's got to be in your history song or some such thing, right? All right, so anyway, what led to the Council of Nicaea? That's what I want to talk about. It is a tale of two cities. Cool, isn't that, huh? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Only in this case, it is not the two cities of Dickens' novel, but it's rather two other cities, and those two cities, the center of the controversy in the very early years of the church, are the cities of, who knows? Sydney?
Antioch and Alexandria.
Thank you. The two cities are Antioch and Alexandria. They also represent a conflict not just between two cities, but between two ways of thinking. And we could put labels on those two ways of thinking. Can anybody help me with that? What would be the way of thinking, the worldview, if you will, the outlook most closely associated with Antioch? It would be the way of thinking connected with people known as... Trevor?
Well, I don't have a name for them, but I think they were thinking that Jesus was like 2/3 God, 1/3 man.
That was one of the heresies that came out of Antioch, yes. But it's more fundamental than that. It's just the common outlook that we would associate with people known as... Anybody know? Okay, you want to learn this now and forever. This is, Antioch stands for Jewish Christianity. Jewish Christianity. I don't have a good map to illustrate this, but you may recall, if you look at a map, here's Jerusalem, here's Egypt, here's Turkey, here's the Persian Gulf. Have you got it all in your map? In your mind? Got the map in your mind? All right. You with me? This is the Mediterranean Sea. All right? This is Greece. This is Italy. You with me? All right. Here's Jerusalem. Where is Antioch vis-a-vis Jerusalem? Where is it? Matthew? Up. Here? Right, that's about right. So here's Jerusalem, here's Antioch. How come Jewish Christianity shifted its venue from Jerusalem to Antioch? What event in history happened that basically squeezed the Christians up to Antioch? Jacob?
The destruction of Jerusalem.
Exactly. So Jerusalem was destroyed in the year... What year, Laura? Was Jerusalem destroyed? The year? 70 AD. by the Romans. The Christian Jewish people largely escaped. In fact, the record of history is they all escaped. So the people who were destroyed in Jerusalem were the Jewish people who had come to Jerusalem, but Christians weren't there. How come the Christians knew that they should get out of town? What was it that was... Go ahead. What was it? Say it.
Was it prophecy?
Prophecy by whom?
Isaiah.
Oh. This is Sunday school, my son. Prophecy by whom?
Prophecy by
Sunday school.
Jesus.
Jesus, that's right.
Isaiah's my go-to prophet.
There you go. He's a good man. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Jesus in the Olivet Discourse had said in Luke's Gospel, you remember this? When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, flee to the hills. The Christians in Jerusalem saw Jerusalem surrounded by armies. They said, oh, I remember something about that. Looked it up. Mabel, look at there. We're supposed to get out of town. They grabbed the knapsack, ran out of town. They escaped. Jerusalem was destroyed. These Christians fled largely south into the Judean wilderness, into what's called Nabatea, Pella, and so on, those cities. Then once the dust settled, they came back. Jerusalem's a wasteland. Nobody's living there anymore except jackrabbits. I mean, it's gone. So they keep going north, and they wind up in the city of Antioch. So basically, Antioch has now become the Neo-Jerusalem. I don't want to say New Jerusalem in the sense of Revelation. I think that's something else, but I'm just saying it becomes the new venue for Jewish Christianity. Okay? And so we would expect the form of Christianity that would flow out of Antioch to be heavily biased toward a flavor of Christianity that you find in the New Testament. You may recall in the New Testament there are characters that run around, they give Paul a lot of grief. They keep trying to drag the Christian faith back into the Jewish religion and basically make it a sect of Judaism. And those people are commonly called, who are those kind of hyper-Jewish people that we run into in the New Testament, who Paul is always having to deal with. And the term's never used in the New Testament, but the term commonly used to describe them is, they are the... Anybody? Jacob?
Judaizers.
Thank you, the Judaizers. You know that term? So, think of Antioch as the city where this kind of Judaizing influence really takes root. All right. On the other hand, we have Alexandria. I put my finger in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Krista, direct my finger to Alexandria.
South, 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 south. Go to the left a little bit. South. There.
Yeah, very good. Alexandria, of course, was established by who? Who founded Alexandria? His name is? Sydney? Thank you, that's right. And so what would we expect Alexandria to have as a sort of cultural influence? Josiah, how would we expect Alexandria to appear culturally?
It was a Greek philosopher.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. All right, so Alexandria stands for Hellenistic Christianity, Greek Christianity. Antioch stands for Jewish Christianity, and a Cold War begins to develop between these two very early. I mean, early in the church's history, certainly by the beginning of the 2nd century. You begin to see two different flavors of Christian thought emerging, centered in these two cities. Obviously more than these cities, there's many other cities involved, but these two are the kind of symbolize the difference. There is a term used in the New Testament that became the lightning rod for the controversy. There was one term that became absolutely the most controversial term in the early church, and it was like the centerpiece of the debate between Alexandria and Antioch, And that term is the term, you all know it. So can you make an intelligent guess? What term do you suppose is the term that was right at the center of the debate, the conflict between Alexandria and Antioch? And Mr. 100% on your test?
The Trinity?
No. But that's a decent guess. It isn't the Trinity, but it is the term. Anybody? You all know it. I'm just wondering if you can kind of guess it here, Krista.
Logos?
That is it. Yeah, the Logos. Who do you suppose liked the term? Who do you suppose hated the term? Nicole, what do you think? Who liked the term Logos? Who thought this was a great term? We should use it a lot.
The people in Alexandria.
Exactly. And so, of course, the Antiochans found it to be, this is what they really accused the Gospel of John of. They said this was an intrusion of Greek thought, infecting the purity of our faith. And so that became kind of the heart of the matter. We talked about Justin Martyr. Of course, Justin Martyr being really holding himself out as a Greek philosopher, not surprisingly. He's one of the first ones who really advances the use of the word logos. It was a term that had been used many times by many others in Greek history. We've been over that. If I were to say to you on a test, please name 4 Greek either movements or people that made heavy use of the word logos, you'd be able to tick those off in your sleep, right? Because I am going to ask you that question on the quarter test, and so you better be able to do that. And I'm not going to go over it now because we've done it 100 times. But that obviously is a Greek idea. There were some who made the argument from a Jewish point of view, although this didn't really dominate, that you can also find the Logos idea in the Old Testament. It's not just a Greek notion, but it also has its roots in the Old Testament Hebrew outlook. Where do you suppose the word Logos, for those who wanted to more or less, keep this word in play from a Jewish point of view, where did they find in the Old Testament a warrant for the use of the word Logos? What do you think, Matthew? You read the Old Testament, you never see the word itself, Logos, which is a Greek word, but where do you find the idea, you suppose, of Logos?
Well, me and John said we're
In the Old Testament.
Oh.
There you are.
right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
There's 2 big answers, 2 common places where the term seems to pop up. Give you a little hint.
That'd be nice.
No, I said, though, that is your hint.
Oh.
And you take it from here.
Shut Spence.
You can call on anybody in the room. These are all,
Spence.
yeah, Spencer.
Well,
Old Testament, idea of Logos.
Let me say somewhere in Isaiah.
Wrong. Sit down.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well,
Sydney?
I would think creation.
Creation is the first one. Thank you. And what is it, Sydney, in creation that at least suggests the idea of Logos?
I don't know, because God spoke everything into existence.
Right. Y'all got that? Y'all see that? It doesn't say, and God made the light. It says, and God said, let there be light. Who's he talking to? Now, I realize that the new joke in town is, when Mr. Gore is so old that when God said, let there be light, he flipped the switch. You've all heard that, right?
I like it.
You like that? See? So, I realize that that's out there, but I want to officially disclaim that. I did not flip the switch. I was not that old. And it, of course, implies the very thing that John eventually says all things were made through him. As if to say the word that God spoke became the creative force by which God created. And so that's one point where Jewish thinkers tried to hook Logos back to their Old Testament. Where's the other point? It is not in Isaiah, but it is in another book of the Old Testament. And I'm wondering if anybody can pull this out. This would be a little bit more obscure unless you already know. Ben?
I'm going to take a guess, the burning bush.
The burning bush is a good thought. It's not the one commonly referred to, but I'd be happy to entertain the argument. But from a Jewish point of view, the text is usually thought of. Sydney?
Well, I only have like a faint recall of it, but there's some prophet and a scroll and him talking.
Well, there's Isaiah eating the scroll. I don't know. That doesn't ring a bell, though. Okay, here it is. Oh, go ahead, Krista, please. No? What are you thinking? Got a guess? That's fine.
Daniel?
Daniel is not it. All right, here it is. Jacob, do you know? No? All right. It is Proverbs chapter 8, in which the term that is personified is not the term word, but the term wisdom. The Greek word Sophia. And it says things like this: I was present when you created the world. I was there. In other words, a personified idea of God's wisdom is associated with God's work not only in creation, but throughout God's, providential care of this universe. So Hebrew thinkers, my only point here, is that not all Jewish thinkers rejected Logos. Some did try to find it in the Old Testament, but generally speaking, it was regarded as more of a Greek idea than a Jewish idea. And it was, at least, in any event, the kind of the crux of the debate. So far, so good? I'm not going through this too rapidly, so it should be fairly easy to follow. All right. Let's think about what happened in Antioch. We could say that in the first century, there's a group of people called the Judaizers. I'm going to put them in parens because if I ask this question on the test, that is not a correct answer. You will get it wrong, all right? But I want you to understand that that is the term that's used to describe the New Testament Jewish kind of influence. The first group, however, in the early 2nd century to come along, which picks up what amounts to this kind of Judaizing influence and begins to teach a sort of view of Christ that reflected this strongly Jewish idea, are called the, I don't know if you've ever heard this term before, look at me with a expression of, oh, that's so exciting, or something like that, when I say the term Ebionites. You ever heard that? Good. Ah, that's great, good. Now, has anybody ever actually heard of the Ebionites? No? Okay. But it was very impressive. I like that. Okay, the Ebionites. This is the correct answer if I ask this on a test. The question will be something like this. What is the name of the earliest movement in Jewish Christianity that resisted the idea of the Logos? And the name associated with them is the Ebionites. Presumably, they got their name from a guy named Ebion. They took a position that was called, and there were some people that actually called themselves by this phrase, alagoi. What does alagoi mean, do you suppose? Alicia, what would you take that word to mean, that little Greek term there, alagoi? Any idea? Use your powers of etymology to think it through.
Well, it could be totally wrong, but it says alagoi, so maybe it has something to do with Logos.
And what would the ah do to that? You're correct. What does the ah do to the logoi part? Against, exactly. Very good. So the alogoi are the anti-logos people. First associated with the Ebionites, but continuing then for some period of time after that. I want to give you 4 points which are connected to the Ebionites. All right, so 4-point Ebionism. This is what they taught. Point number 1, they were hard monotheists. What would you guess is intended by the phrase or the term hard monotheists?
Probably means they wouldn't believe in the Trinity.
Okay, no Trinity. That's right. And so, and just extend that a little bit more. What do they believe in?
They believe in one God.
One God. That's right. What would be the most famous religion in the world today that would champion that notion of a hard monotheism?
Islam.
Islam. Okay. They had essentially what amounts to a rather Islamic view of God. God is one, only one, and that called hard monotheism. There's no sense of plurality in God. There's no Trinity. Nothing like that. The Jewish religion also, to this day, is rather given to a more hard monotheism, of course. But Islam would be what you'd think of. So the Ebionites were, in some ways, very ferocious in their commitment to one God, you see. Number 2, Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. They certainly believed in Jesus. They did not believe that he is God. They did believe that he's the Jewish Messiah. They believe that he is the one who the Old Testament, many prophets in the Old Testament, especially the prophet, Mr. Ansett, Isaiah, along with many others, had predicted that eventually one would come who would be the capital M Messiah. And the Ebionites believe that. They believe that Jesus was indeed the Jewish Messiah, but not God. Just this very powerfully anointed man. Third, they were premillennialists. But you know what I mean by premillennialism. You should. You all took doctrine from me, so you should have that somewhere up there. Go ahead, Megan.
I think that means that when God returns, he's going to come into Jerusalem.
Okay, they did believe that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Okay, well, no, that's right. That's good. Good answer. Anyone who supplement that? That's certainly the idea. Premillennialism. Go ahead.
Doesn't that mean that there will be a millennium that he rules the earth?
That's right. And who rules?
Well, Jesus.
That's right, or the Messiah. Yeah. That's right. So premillennialism. If I could get rid of this. Think of a timeline. Here's human history. Here's the death of Christ, the resurrection. Jerusalem's destroyed. We're living out here now, 2nd century. These Ebionites believed that Jesus was going to return sometime soon. They expected Jesus to return, many of them within their lifetimes. They thought Jesus was just gone for a while, a short time. And that he was going to come back, and that he was going to come back to Jerusalem, and that he was going to establish in Jerusalem a kingdom, which was exactly what the Jewish expectation was in the first place. That's what everybody thought Jesus would do in the first place, establish a kingdom in Jerusalem, and so on. Well, the Ebionites said, okay, so he had to die first and all that, but he's still going to come back and establish this kingdom, and that's going to be right here in Jerusalem. It's probably going to happen soon, and he's going to reign for 1,000 years. based on a text in the Bible that mentions explicitly a 1,000-year reign by Christ, and that text is found. Ben?
Well, that's found in Revelation.
That's right, Revelation 20, go ahead.
What would they say about Jesus performing miracles?
They believed he performed miracles.
But did they just think he had divine power?
Oh, sure, lots of people perform miracles. Elijah performed miracles, Moses performed miracles, Jesus performed miracles. That doesn't prove he's God.
Well, what about like him raising people from the dead?
Yeah, so did Elijah. He raised people from the dead.
Well, but he raised himself from the dead. Would they just say that was God?
That was just God raising him from the dead. Doesn't prove he's God. Yeah, that would be their view. Same as Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
Would they say that Christ's sacrifice wasn't enough to get them to heaven, since he was just
Yeah, they were strongly committed to a salvation by good works kind of theology. They believed that Jesus' death had an atoning impact, but that it still needed to be supplemented substantially by a life of virtue. Yeah. Did I?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So how did they expect Christ to come back? Did they
Physically, visibly, in the clouds,
That God
just as he
would,
said.
bring him back?
Yeah, that he would, Jesus, the last thing he said before he left was, the angel said to the apostles as Jesus departed, this same Jesus that you've seen going to heaven will return in like manner as you've seen him go, Acts chapter 1. And that's exactly what they expected. And they thought it was going to happen any minute now. And that there was established this Jewish kingdom, basically, in Jerusalem. And he would reign for 1,000 years. Okay. Good questions? Any other questions, Alicia? Last thing I want you to get is the very point I made a minute ago, that they had their soteriology was based heavily on works. These people, if you want to think about the New Testament, these people were something like what you might expect, the Pharisees to have become, or the very conservative Jewish types that you run into in the New Testament. The Pharisees did survive, and many of them wound up being Christian believers, but some of them were Christian believers in this sort of Ebionite outlook. Does that make sense? So think of this as kind of the Pharisee version of Christian thought, early 2nd century. All right, so that's what's happening in Antioch. And I do want you to know every detail of what I just wrote on the board there. Ebionite, Oligoi, those 4 points, and that they are connected to this Jewish kind of Christianity. All right, on the other hand, we have what's happening in Alexandria. Just as Antioch represents a hybrid between biblical Christianity and Jewish thought, Alexandria represents a hybrid between biblical Christianity and Greek thought. Right? So somewhere in the middle you've got the truth of God is found in the Bible, and then you've got both of these influences dragging the Christian faith in two opposite directions. One, toward a Jewish outlook, which tends to emphasize the humanity of Christ and deny his deity, and then the Greek outlook, which tended to emphasize the divinity of Christ but deny his humanity. You follow that? Did y'all catch that? That heresy in church history that generally denies the humanity of Christ but affirms his divinity, if not his deity, I'll say his divinity, would be what? What's the term for the heresy that denies Jesus' humanity, says he only appeared to be human, but affirms his deity or divinity? It'd get a little squishy there, but one or the other. What is the term for that heresy? Anybody know? It is called? Krista? No? Sit? No? Go ahead, Krista.
Gnosticism?
No, but it's a species of Gnosticism. Virtually all Gnostics adhered to this more narrowly defined heresy known as, Laura.
Marcionism?
Marcion was also one who embraced this. Sydney, the name of the heresy is? Okay, here it is. Get this. This I want you to know. The term Docetism. Now you remember it, don't you?
Yeah.
Stephen.
I'm sorry, would they say that Christ had any humanity, or would they say it's purely...
The Docetists said no. The early, crass Docetists said only Jesus only appeared to be human. Later, Stephen, Docetism, such as you'd find, for example, in Arianism, and even later in, say, Eutychianism, said that there was a kind of human aspect to Christ, but it was only partially human. So it becomes more subtle as time goes on.